Let's begin in Detroit. During a visit to a Ford truck plant, President Trump walked past a plant employee who shouted out, "Pedophile protector." Now, Trump responded by "F you," only he didn't say F, back at a plant worker, TJ Sabula, and raised his middle finger in full view of everyone. Check this out. The video circulated instantly, and the White House didn't dispute its authenticity either. In fact, they described the response as appropriate. Surprise, surprise. But what makes this more than just a crude moment on the campaign trail is the context of it. The worker was calling out Trump on the Epstein files controversy, a scandal that has not gone away. Now, I've heard some people and seen some comments of folks saying that TJ Sabula, who was suspended for this, deserved it and he should have been fired because it was unprofessional. Unprofessional? This man is the president of the United States, okay? He campaigned on the Epstein files controversy. In fact, it has increasingly dogged his administration and his reputation since Epstein was charged and convicted with trafficking, and more so since his questionable death while in prison. Now, I think it says something about leadership that chooses confrontation over explanation, anger over clarity, reaction over transparent governance from this administration who says they're the most transparent in history, but won't tell us anything about his health, but won't tell us the truth about what's happening here with the Epstein files, but won't tell us the truth about what we're doing in Venezuela, but won't tell us the truth about anything that he's doing. Tonight, we're going to look at what that pattern adds up to in policy, in public trust, and in the institutions that hold this republic together. But before we go any further, if you could please like this video and subscribe. Tap the notification bell so you don't miss when we drop new episodes. They show up on Thursday nights around 7 p.m. All right? So across multiple states, federal immigration enforcement has escalated to violent confrontations. In Minnesota, days ago at this point, ICE agents fatally shot 37-year-old U.S. citizen named Renee Nicole Good, and protests followed. I mean, boy, did they. Not only in Minnesota, but across this nation. This is a major act of patriotism, in my view, because the protests have been met by nothing but hostility from ICE and CBP at the direction of Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and every other Trump administration flunky out there. But then in an unusual move, several Department of Justice prosecutors in Minnesota resigned rather than be a part of defending the operation that wants to investigate and blame and possibly even prosecute the victim and her partner. State governments, including Minnesota and Illinois, are now suing the federal government, saying these surges in enforcement are unconstitutional. They terrorize communities and exceed lawful authority. And when you layer all of this over changing federal policy, ending temporary protected status for some immigrant communities, and threatening to cut funds to so-called sanctuary cities, the result isn't just enforcement, it's outright terror. And we're seeing it on our TVs, on social media, in videos taken on cell phones, and by independent media. Simultaneously, Trump's approach to foreign policy has shifted from bully diplomacy to outright rhetoric of invasion. Dangerous flirtations with ideas like U.S. control over Greenland have drawn rare bipartisan criticisms, including from foreign leaders and U.S. lawmakers who see such talk as destabilizing. These aren't isolated headlines. They reflect a broader set of reactions from allies and adversaries alike. And even as the opposition grows, Trump continues to saber rattle. He does it toward Iran, toward Cuba, and even now toward Iceland for some reason. But now we're starting to see that he's taking aim at NATO itself, which I believe was the main goal. Because his buddy, his mentor, Vladimir Putin, that's exactly what he wants. He wants to disassemble NATO so he can have his wish of making a run on up through Europe, okay? To me, it looks like a global scale distraction. But let me know what you think in the comments, all right? Now let's bring it back home to people's lives here in America. Because as we all know, the Enhanced Affordable Care Act premium subsidies expired at the beginning of the year. Now here's the effect so far. ACA enrollment has declined. About 800,000 fewer Americans signed up this year compared to last. directly because higher costs are pushing them away. It's the first drop in 4 years of ACA coverage. The premiums they could once afford at $100 or $200 a month for a single person, sometimes even families depending on your financial situation, are now double and triple what they were. AARP reports that people 50 to 64 years of age, these are millions of people, by the way, are having to consider downgrading their plans or even going without insurance altogether. This could lead to disaster here. It could lead to people skipping their meds or delaying preventative or vital care because it's the difference between paying rent and going bankrupt sometimes. So let's have a shout out to the bipartisan effort in the House to move an extension bill to the Senate, where Republicans in the majority are still trying to block or delay the extensions, choosing budget fights over the needs of the American majority. And all that chaos just translates to bills, the kind that you get in the mail. All right, so let's pivot to the scandal that just won't go away. Came up earlier. Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act earlier in the year or last year with deadlines for further public release of records connected to Jeffrey Epstein's network. But the administration has been slow to comply and government has basically stonewalled the disclosure. I mean, over-redacting, only putting out maybe 1% of the files that we know the FBI had been tasked with early in 2025, going through and seeing how many times Donald Trump's name was in it. So they knew just what they had. And now they're slow rolling this release with millions and millions of documents still being looked at. And according to reports, the Southern District of New York, most of the prosecutors there have been retasked with checking into these Epstein files. So what should have been a compliance issue has become a stalemate between power and transparency. Hopefully, Manhattan Federal Court Judge Paul Engelmeyer grants a special master request to independently oversee this release. Meanwhile, even reporters who covered the Epstein story, like Julie K. Brown, have faced pushback in the form of surveillance claims and resistance to their press freedoms. Now, when the rule of law applies differently to the powerful than it does to everyone else, the public sees it, and we feel it too. They talked all about a two-tiered system of justice when Biden was in office, even though we saw President Biden let his own son be charged and prosecuted, and he did not stand in the way. So I'm heartened to see that folks are waking up to this institutional erosion. Now let's talk about something that should unsettle every American, because it's not partisan, but because it strikes at the heart of economic governance. The Department of Justice has issued grand jury subpoenas to Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, threatening criminal indictment over his congressional testimony about a $2.5 billion project, a move Powell and former Fed chair say is unprecedented and aimed only to pressure the Fed. Now, my take is that this is retribution, not only for Powell's refusal to follow Trump's lead on, interest rates, but because Powell fact-checked him live on air about this very thing, embarrassing him. Go ahead, check it out.
It looks like it's about 3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
Our notes had it about 3.1 as well.
3.1,
3.2.
This came from us?
Yes. I don't know who does that.
Now, you're including the Martin renovation. You just added
our entire capital.
Yeah, you just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building.
Well,
including
no,
the
but
Martin building.
it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago.
Now, Powell himself says the subpoenas are a pretext for political intimidation designed to influence the Fed's independence on interest rates. Former Fed chairs Janet Yellen and Ben Bernanke and Alan Greenspan, appointed by both Democrats and Republican presidents now, signed a statement condemning the move as something seen in countries with weak institutions, not the United States. This is former leaders of your central bank warning that political interference here could ripple through inflation, markets, borrowing costs, and our retirement security. We're witnessing the neutrality of our central bank become a battlefield. So we have to keep our eyes on this. All right? This is where public conduct and policy collide. Multiple credible reports show that Trump's public behavior, from the Detroit outbursts to repeated confrontations with institutions like the Fed, all right, defaming Renee Good, things like this have become more reactive and more confrontational. This isn't conjecture about private health. It's about observable behaviors that affect decision-making at the highest levels. We all see this. Leadership isn't about policy outcomes. It's about predictability and restraint and perspective. When the country's leaders treat a heckler with a middle finger, revels in the rhetoric of conquest, and publicly attacks independent institutions like the Fed, people notice. The world notices. And then trust falters. And then the confidence in America as a world leader erodes. Now, here's where something unusual happens. Republicans who are, long reliable vote partners for this administration now. So we're not talking about folks who kind of go back and forth on both sides of the aisle. We're talking about people here in Congress who are 90+% voting with Donald Trump. They're not all speaking with one voice right now. In fact, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, my home state, someone I do not agree with politically, okay, but whose voice does matter, said on the Senate floor that he's sick of, quote, stupid advice from the administration, criticized foreign policy missteps like the Greenland talk, and explicitly opposed the DOJ's aggressive actions toward Powell's independence.
Mr. Miller said that Greenland should be part of the U.S. That is absurd. You know what makes me cranky? Stupid. What makes me cranky is when people don't do their homework. Folks, amateur hour is over. You don't speak on behalf of this U.S. Senator or the Congress. We are a co-equal branch. And if that were to come to pass, there would be a vote on the floor to make it real. And I'm sick of stupid. And the amateurs who said it was a good idea should lose their jobs.
This, to me, is a major reality check. Allies, Trump's increasingly erratic behavior also has its limits. So here's the through line. If leadership is about steadiness under pressure, then what we're seeing here is something else entirely. It's a presidency defined more by retribution than direction, more by confrontation than coherence, and more by spectacle rather than stewardship. From skyrocketing healthcare costs to opaque transparency to federal intimidation of independent institutions like the Fed to public conduct that undermines our own human dignity. The pattern is clear. This chaos is not accidental. And we need to be consistently calling it out and demanding our leaders act on our behalf. So if this episode helped you see through any of this noise, please like it, comment your perspective below, and subscribe. And share it with somebody who needs a clearer lens on today's political news, all right? We all need to be living in the same reality with the same truth. And if you're still moved to do something even more real, call your senators and representatives and let them know what your concerns are about the ACA subsidies. Support nonprofit journalism that holds power to account and are not worried about corporate interests. Vote in every single election, local, state, and federal. That means paying attention a little bit. Guys, it's important because all politics are local. And I'm going to ask you to do what I always ask you to do, and that's to be loud in your listening and to be real in your truth. I'm DeAntony Collins, and this has been The Quiet Loud. Y'all take care.